Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Kyriakidi, Global Thought Leader at Kantar, and I'm delighted to be joined here today by Ruth, who is the Head of Planning, Insight, and Effectiveness at Virgin Media O2. Ruth, welcome. Please tell me a little bit about you and about your role at Virgin Media O2.
Hi, Mary. So I head up Planning, Insight and Effectiveness here at Virgin Media O2, and it does what it says on the tin. So from a planning perspective, I look at a 3-year horizon in terms of how do you want to differentiate and market, and what does that look like on a quarterly basis as well in terms of planning. So all of our advertising, looking at all of the insights, obviously that feed into that plan, and then measuring the effectiveness of all of that as well. So to continue that ongoing cycle of optimization. So thank you for inviting me to talk about effectiveness today.
It's a pleasure, and it sounds like a fab road. Now,
Absolutely.
the results from our media reaction study indicate a lack of integrated viewpoint and reveals that only 63% of marketers measure the impact of their marketing campaigns using both brand and sales measures. Now, you talked about this exact point on our panel at the Ignite event a few months ago. This is exactly where we met. And you brought up the practicalities that a marketer is facing in the business. So there's a paradox there where you're asked to achieve sustainable long-term growth for your brand, yet you need to report on a weekly basis results to the board. It's an all too familiar scenario, I think, for all of us. I mean, how can one best defend their brand investment?
Yeah, it's a real dilemma that marketers are facing today, especially since budgets are tight and everyone has to really demonstrate why they're investing, what they're looking to achieve with their investment, etc. And budgets are obviously being scrutinised. So I think first and foremost, you talked about the long term, and it's important to also recognise that it's not just important for marketeers. The business is obviously looking at the long term and the short term. So you're right, we do have to report weekly in terms of sales, and marketing has to demonstrate what they're doing to contribute to sales. But I just want to clarify that we do obviously have other sessions where we do focus on the future and strategy. So we do kind of balance the two. But when it comes to the kind of weekly trading calls, let's call them, I think it's easier for some departments to talk through what they're doing to drive sales and the impact that they're having on the results. For example, our colleagues in performance marketing have a much easier job to say we invested X and we delivered Y sales off the back of it. Which doesn't always mean it's incremental either. So, but they do have some metrics they can easily talk about. When we're talking more about brand impact, or even just above the line trading, for example, where you don't have the direct sales correlation, you're relying on other things it's more lead indicators as to how you're performing. So you need to educate the business around the short-term impact that you're having, but that it's going to lead to longer-term success. So if you're launching a new campaign, you need to have all of those lead indicators in place, things like your ad awareness, your consideration, your share of branded search. Are those all moving up in line with your expectations, and how long it takes a campaign to be embedded? So that's kind of what you can do in the short term to demonstrate how your campaign is being impactful. The other side, though, is a little bit harder and requires, I would say, a number of other tools and techniques. So we use so econometrics, to look at the overall effectiveness of how our brand campaigns are performing. And we use that alongside our brand trackers, for example, to understand, are we shifting the key metrics that we know through econometrics modeling are also linked to driving sales, both in the short term and the long term. So it's really about having those weekly metrics, but then having the long-term metrics. And what we've seen from is that you can look at the effectiveness, and what I mean by effectiveness is actual sales, and you can also look at how efficient and effective it was. So that's where you look at ROI, for example, and it's always a balance of the two. So And I'd say above and beyond econometrics, we also look at, and the brand trackers, we also look at things like test and learn. So what are we seeing through econometrics that maybe we want to get more granular detail on? That's where we also do test and learn. So there's a number of things that we can do to just continue to look at how our brand campaigns are performing and get buy-in from the business.
Great. We've recently created a guide that debates the industry's most pertinent dilemmas. Now, these are themes that have been polarizing the marketing community for decades. Now, we, of course, talked about marketing ROI, return on investment, and whether it's a nonsensical metric or not. But we concluded that, yes, it is, if it is used on its own. So my question to you, Ruth, is, how do you make sure that you stay away from a biased measurement system? And how much of your approach has to do with educating teams and possibly other departments around you about what drives base sales and what drives incrementability?
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting the conversations that you have with different people across the business means that they're all interested in different things. So when you are speaking to finance, their focus is on ROI, certainly from my experience. And I understand that because they're looking at the amount of spend that you're given and how effective was it, or how efficient was it, should I say. And that is only one lens. So I have had to educate around, well, actually, there's a lot of things that we're trying to drive. We know that marketing actually does drive sales, and therefore we need to make sure that we've got the right channel mix, the right level of spend in order to do that. So we use econometrics not only to look backwards, but also to look forwards and predict how many sales we can drive with a given spend envelope. And then that goes the same for campaigns. I have had conversations where the focus might be, what is the ROI going to be on this specific channel or this specific campaign? And yes, we can look at that, but that's more about optimization. We really want to focus on the bigger picture and think strategically as well. So there's a reason why we're putting campaigns out there. It's not just because we're buying media. We're actually telling people about our organization, why you should be picking us over the competitor, and we've got some real differentiating proof points to talk about. If you don't talk about them, then nobody's going to hear about them. So there's a little bit of sharing why you're doing things, and what will be the outcome of that. Sales ROI, yes, but also brand outcomes. So we want to stand for roaming, for example, and therefore the campaign is going to shift the dial in us standing for roaming. Those are examples. And I think I'd give 3 tips in terms of how to kind of get the organization on board. First one would be educate your marketing teams first. Spend a lot of time helping them understand how you're evaluating and evaluating effectiveness. Second one would be speak the language of the teams that you're engaging with. So when it's finance, understand where they're coming from. If it's the commercial teams, understand that they're focused on sales and traffic, for example. So that's what they want to know, what you're driving for them. And then I'd say finally, tie it back to business, brand, and campaign outcomes. I think so often marketers can really focus on campaign outcomes. So they're looking at things like reach, impressions, and clicks. But when you're trying to engage the broader organization, they just think that's marketing speak. So you really need to bring it back to the business outcomes. And that's where you'll start to get their buy-in.
Excellent. Last question for you, Ruth. When it comes to anticipating the future, would you say that a good brand tracking system is all a marketer needs for good brand health? I mean, could it be that it's the answer marketers are seeking to, yes, anticipate the future, to become aware of threats, maybe early enough, and possibly even to maximize growth from adjacent categories?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I don't think it's the only thing, but I think your brand reporting can really help with a lot of those. So for example, we have a lot of companies might just buy off the shelf campaign trackers, for example, and that tells you how your campaign's doing, which is great in and of itself. But I think in order to really kind of get ahead and think of the future, if you look at brand equity studies, understanding where you sit versus your competitors and understand the territories that you own and what they own, you can start to get early indicators as to how you're performing there, whether a competitor is starting to encroach on your territories, and therefore what do you need to do. So it's very helpful, but I think there are a lot of other things, and obviously you always have to keep an eye on the competition and what they're doing, week by week almost, depending on the industry. Well, in all industries, I would say today. But yes, absolutely helpful. And yeah, and then alongside that, MMM helps us to look at forecasting future sales outcome. Our brand tracker feeds into that as well. So it's all aligned. And we know if we drive one metric, that will help drive sales, for example. So a lot of work in that space that's very helpful.
Yes, yes. It was such a delight chatting to you, Ruth. I mean, what I liked the most about your answers is that they were direct and very practical. One can go away now and put them to good use. So thank you very
Great.
much.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.